Hi, I'm Marbellos, a little fellow working on a project I like to call a procedurally generated dynamic economy for buying and selling radishes simulator. Essentially a watered down stock market, kind of like the one in Animal Crossing. I started work on my project not that long ago, as a way to teach myself scripting so I could one day become a game developer. There's just one slight issue. My game doesn't really stand out. I've taken a few steps to build up an identity for my project, but we're gonna need more. We need to double down on some unique game mechanics that no game before has ever implemented. So today we're adding mining to the game. Well, that's not all. I've cooked up some sick mechanics that'll help improve the game significantly, but more on that later. Right now, gaining money is simply achieved by clicking a button. This grants the player their coin immediately, which is supposed to go into the radish market. This creates a blend between a clicking and economy simulator. The issue here is it's just plain boring. Over time, the gameplay devolves into fighting the urge to turn on an auto clicker. As you progress through clicking sims, you'll find that prices start to go up exponentially, requiring the player to invest in clicking multipliers and upgrades. This eventually turns into managing quadrillions of currency. This just isn't what we're going for. Although clicking is a way of gathering currency, we want most of our profits to come from buying and selling radishes at the right time. That brings us to where we are now. One comment suggested adding some variety to the gameplay by introducing animations or events to each mechanic. Today I delete the clicking part of my game and exchange it for the newly improvised mining system. Here's the plan. First order of business is a screen overhaul. We're gonna need a lot of room for what I plan on adding, and since space is starting to fill up, we gotta start condensing some of our elements. I moved all of the currency UIs to the left of the screen and shrunk the kinda oversized experience bar. I also scripted a function into the shop label that hides all of its components upon being clicked. This left me room to add the mining space. I quickly cooked up 3 beta textures for different ranks of ores. Each time you break an ore, a new one will drop for you to mine. It will be random between what kind will drop. Coins you earn from each rock will also be random from a fixed range, depending on what type of ore it is. Now it's time we get the click button hooked up to the mining system. When the player starts up the game, a new random number will be generated. This number will decide which rock will show up. With some short scripting, I got this running. I then created a new variable that represented the rock's health. This health is equal to the clicks it'll take for the rock to break. This number will change according to the type of ore that gets displayed. I then rewired the click button so it would subtract from the ore's health before rewarding a random amount of coins. Now that the amount of coins you earn is random, I also added a new label that displays how many coins you get from mining the ore. I also created new textures for the ores once they get hit and created a script that makes it look like the ore is getting mined. Well, sort of. I went ahead and found some new sound effects to create further depth, and now I officially have a mining structure to work off of. I may have kind of done it in the least efficient way possible, but that's something future me gets to worry about. With this new mining system, you now rack up a lot more coins than before. This is better in the sense that we can now gain more coins than simply sitting there and clicking, but there's still one issue to tackle, that being AFK auto-clicking. No matter what, players will find a way to automate the clicking process. That's fine by me, but we need to implement a way to control it so players don't manipulate the core gameplay by going AFK. Since our game's prices won't be exponentially increasing, it can be a big problem if the player starts quickly gaining thousands of coins, since this will devalue the purpose of buying and selling radishes. Although there's a number of solutions to this issue, I tried finding the most creative fix. One idea was to create a punishment for clicking too fast for long periods of time. One way I could add this is through a durability system. As the player clicks, their mining durability will decrease. Repairing durability can simply be done by purchasing a repair in the shop. This way we can allow players to play without too much of a chore while also preventing any AFK farms. The other fix to this problem is adding random economic events. These events will pop up randomly throughout the day and will require a small fee to be paid. This also links to another addition, that being debt. If the player is unable to pay with their pocket money, they will need to go into debt. This debt will be tracked and paid off at the end of the week if possible. If the debt remains after a couple of weeks, the player gets a game over. Adding these changes still allows the player to auto-click if they really want to speed up the earning process, but will require the player to be more attentive to the gameplay instead of leaving an auto-clicker on and leaving the game. To create the durability, I created 2 new icons. The bar will display durability and will decrease accordingly. The shield icon will be a buyable item in the shop that will refill the durability bar. Scripting these into the game was a straightforward process. Now that we have the system working, let's spice up the visuals. This was my first time learning how particles worked in Godot, and I'm not joking when I say I had a hard time grasping how it worked. Numerous tutorials, documents, and hours later, I decided to put it all down and try learning things myself. Godot has 2 types of particle emitters, one type that runs on the CPU and one that runs on the GPU. The CPU emitter is obviously a lot weaker, but it appears a lot more straightforward to use. Since I wasn't planning on featuring thousands of particles, I settled on the CPU emitter and got an effect up. The problem came when trying to call the effect. No tutorial was able to help my issue, so I scrapped the particle and its unique scene entirely. I started started over on my game scene, this time with the GPU emitter. I was able to find out how it worked, recreating my particle and script together, and got it working. Just like that. Since I did this myself, this is probably not considered a recommended way of spawning particles, but we got it running, so that's all that matters. The next task I got to tackle was an animation for the rock when it spawns in. I brainstormed some ideas, but eventually settled with a falling animation. Setting this up was fairly straightforward since I have experience with the Godot animation editor. With that, we now have mining completely in the game. Since the start of this video, we got the mining system up and running, a durability system to coincide with the mining, as well as a new spawn animation and breaking effect. I put my blood, sweat, and tears into getting this all set up, but hopefully this helps combat the stagnant feeling that my game has right now. As I continue development, I plan on adding more additions that make the game feel more alive. Alright, let's move on to some other necessary additions to the game, one of which being the rest of the shop. Making the shop fully functional will add depth to the experience and make the game feel more finished. Before we get started on the shop though, we gotta flesh out our menu. Currently all we have is a button that returns the player back to the home screen. We're gonna make a new menu that will have more options, settings, and configurations than a simple return to menu button. I started work by creating a new UI for the shop background as well as new buttons. I played around with the placement and animation and eventually landed on something good, at least for what we're looking for. Now pressing the escape or tab keys will activate the new menu. Making these buttons work will be a lengthy task to overcome. So let's start light and work on the return and info buttons. These are pretty self-explanatory. The info button will present the player with, well, information. This will come in handy in case they forget how something works. The home button will work the same as the current return button I have now. This button will be for configuring settings, mostly sound effects, and these two, well, you'll have to wait and see. After getting the menu working, I got in a bit of playtesting and decided to make a change. I decided being able to sell on the same day made the gameplay kinda stale, since it didn't warrant any sort of risk when buying radishes. If the selling price was higher than the buying price, then why not buy the radishes, even if they're kind of expensive? I altered the game script to detect if any radishes were purchased. If so, the sell bucket will not be taking any radishes that day. The next day, you'll be able to sell, only if you don't decide to purchase radishes that day as well. This will add some risk to buying radishes since you won't know when you can make a profit. I also added a cap to how many radishes you can hold. Earlier, I added a cap to how many radishes you could purchase in a day. I also plan on adding a holding cap. Now the player will only be able to hold up to 8 radishes at any time, but this number can be upgraded in the shop. This will help balance the early game, but for now these numbers are placeholders and could be altered in the future. With that, we now officially have mining and radish retail, as well as some other helpful features and additions. This update will bring us a long way to the completion of the game, so I'm happy with what we got done. As for always, let's take a look at the gameplay for the game before we wrap things up. Alright, that's all from me for now. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next one. See ya.